What's going on, everybody? Wilson here, your spiritual hype man. Super happy to be back. Another episode, and I am here joined with my great friend Russell Holloway. Thank you so much.
Hey Wilson,
How are you doing?
it's great to be here, man.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been quite a minute, like since we actually connected, right? We connected about 10 years ago.
I would say like 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay.
Like it was at the Ideas Dinner,
Yeah.
and it was out at there at Tomoka
Yeah.
Creek, and that was such a like. I remember we made an impression right out of the
Did
gate.
it?
So and I've been tracking it ever since
Cool.
then.
Thanks.
Following you.
Yeah, there's been a couple times we interacted after that. It was a good. It was actually a pretty good idea in terms of what she put together.
Right. Yeah, I forgot.
Lacey.
Lacey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a dinner where
They would get like strangers, like 8 strangers that didn't know each other, come together for conversation, and they would throw out I remember the topic, one of the topics of conversation, like if you could introduce anything back into the community, what would it be? And that was kind of our topic of conversation. Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. And since then, I've been following you, and I think we like did a little
Yeah.
group thing during COVID online.
I remember that.
Yeah,
That was cool. I was thankful for that. For you actually you invite on that. That was cool.
right.
So for obviously we're gonna have some new listeners because of you. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. And so I'd like to just express, the nothing changed in you, the philosophy, the thought, the process, the mindset. Um, the way I've broken it down, or the way I figured out, is that throughout like life, in essence, is just a bunch of situations over a long period of time, and it's these situations that we make decisions that create an outcome, and you're either happy about it, you feel good, or you don't.
Yeah.
And so it's the thought of identifying the situations that we're not very happy with our situation or outcome,
Right.
and then start figuring out what is that, and then reverse engineer it. So the thought or the concept is influence creates thoughts. Thoughts create emotion. Emotion drives the action or the inaction,
Yeah.
and those actions ultimately are the decisions that bring you to an outcome.
Yeah.
And that's all life is: a bunch of these situations,
Right.
and then making decisions, and then coming to this outcome.
So if you change the input,
Right. So the question is, what are you not, reflecting and identifying what am I not happy with? And then reverse engineering using, okay, what was the influence? What was the thought? What was the emotion? And then what drove me to that decision?
Awesome.
And how do I change that? Because a lot of things I feel are cyclical, right? There are things in our lives that we do on a cyclical basis, or you find situations that are similar that get you to a very similar decision-making,
Right.
decision point.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah, we kind of have this way of rehearsing our behavior. And so like to change our behavior, we almost have to rehearse our way out of it by re-engineering how we behave.
100% drives that behavior, right?
Yeah.
So for everybody that's listening, obviously we've hit 70 countries. It's been crazy. Yeah, it's a powerful affirmation that I truly appreciate. For those people, could you tell us exactly who you are and what you do now as the individual, and how you're, when you're helping people do at the moment? And then we're gonna unpack. We're gonna go back and unpack everything.
Yeah. So my name's Russell Holloway, and I don't know if it matters, but I'm 56 years old, just for context.
You
And
telling people I'm 28.
right. And my kids, like, they say, well, you might be 56, but you have that emotional maturity of maybe like a 23-year-old. And I was like, oh, I'll take that. It's better than 17.
100%.
It's
a good idea.
Yeah. And so I'm a licensed professional counselor. I live in Savannah, Georgia as my primary residence, but we lived in Daytona Beach, Florida for 23 years. We still have a group practice in Daytona Beach. And so we're down here every other week for that. Back in 2006, I went back to college to become a therapist. And, I really wanted to help people, and a lot of therapists have it in their story that, they had a positive counseling experience. And I certainly did, and which was very helpful. And then I reached a point where I wanted to also be a therapist myself. Now, I do remember when I told my therapist in a session that I wanted to become a therapist, he had the look of pure terror on his face. And he tried to hide it, but he was like, oh, is this a good idea? And but he got behind it. He supported this. And so I went back to school. And when I graduated, I used some of my prior experience in business to open a counseling center. So in 2008, we opened a Port Orange Counseling Center. And, eventually that grew to like 5 counseling centers. But then when we were moving out of this area, we kind of, started shuttling those off for individual practices. And, so there was this intention to move to Savannah and stay there, but we're just finding our way back to Daytona, I guess is where we're supposed to be.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the first question is, what's pulling you back?
It just feels like there's unfinished business. I think like we are like really called to be here. Like the one thing, we have friends here, we know the community, we absolutely love Savannah. It's such a beautiful city, and we're making good friends there. But I feel, I don't want to be weird about it, but I really felt God was like calling us back to Daytona. And so we came back, and that's what we're doing here. So we're trying to serve the people of Daytona Beach and surroundings, good counseling and trying to train counselors.
No worries.
Just how to go.
Yeah, whatever you want. You want you can grab it and
I just want to turn it off.
Yeah, turn it off. No worries, man. Yeah, this is there's no. We're not like everybody.
Yeah.
So
Usually, this is like the first rule of being a therapist is don't answer the phone unless you want to get stuck on the phone.
Yeah.
So, but I usually have the ringer turned off.
That's cool. So you're back. So
Yeah.
thought, was this closed before you opened it?
No. So we kind of left like I said, at one point we were managing 5 different locations here in Volusia County, and when we left, we just kept one in this particular building, but it was kind of just on cruise control. The therapists here were all they could take care of themselves and had good practices and everything. So we left it open. We thought if we sold the building, then they might have to leave, or they might stay, and rent from the new owner of the building. But when we realized we were moving back to Daytona Beach, we said, let's put new energy into it. And so that's what we're doing.
Yeah,
we actually joined another counseling practice in town called Creation Counseling. So now what used to be Daytona Beach Counseling Center is Creation Counseling Daytona Beach.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And who's Creation?
So that's Jess Gibson.
Okay.
She's the founder of Creation Counseling Port Orange. And back in the day, she was actually our office manager. And then she became a therapist. And then she opened up her own center. And then when I told her we were coming back to town, she said, well, why don't we just merge our operations? I was like, well, that'd be awesome.
Done. Wow. Very mellow. Very awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously the thought is to help people get through certain crises.
Yeah. So we just provide a full slate of different counseling, marriage counseling, individual counseling. We're all professionally trained, licensed by the state of Florida. So we have licensed mental health counselors, we have marriage and family therapists, and we have licensed clinical social workers. There's about 10 people in the practice. And we also train students. We're a training facility. So we're pretty busy practice. And, so I love being around therapists. They're the best people in the world to work with, obviously. And because being therapists are very supportive.
100%.
And that's one thing I've always loved about being a therapist, is being around other therapists, even when I was a student.
Very cool. Yeah, I feel like there's a certain nuance to I think therapy is the title of the word, but it's that individual that has a certain characteristics to like understand the perspective, and then also empathy and sympathy at the same time. With no judgment.
Right. I mean, I think that's the X factor in counseling. There's a famous therapist, or he was a psychiatrist, named Irv Yalom, and he has written a lot of books about providing therapy. One of his best books is The Gift of Therapy. Anyone could read it. He also wrote a book called Love's Executioner, which anyone can read, where he just talks about different cases chapter by chapter. And he's kind of like, if there was Mount Rushmore of therapists, he would be on it. And he used to, someone asked him, there's so many different theoretical approaches to therapy. What's the X factor? Why do the ones that work, why do they all work? And he said the X factor in therapy is that someone can share their most painful experiences or most difficult experiences. Sometimes it's things that they have experienced on them, like a trauma, but sometimes, like a veterans, it might even be something that they did to someone else, something we call moral injury. and they can share these things with someone else and still be respected and still be the person has positive regard for them and accepts them. That's what's healing. It's the idea that you can share these things and still be accepted. So that's probably the most important uh, foundation of being a good therapist, is the idea that you can really listen to other people's stories, not judge them, and just be there with them as they let those stories unfold.
What was that term for
Moral injury?
moral injury?
So moral injury is this idea that when you do something to harm someone else, but it fundamentally is against like your moral framework.
Right.
You might have done it in a certain situation to like save yourself. Like let's say like you were being brutally attacked by someone and just trying to protect yourself, you killed them.
Right.
Or like a soldier might be given orders like, hey, we want you to like attack this village or attack this town, and you're just doing what you're told to do, but then you do something to harm someone else. Like dealing with that afterwards, dealing with the trauma that you inflicted on someone else, or even traumatized yourself.
That feeling.
Yeah, so we have a term for that. It's called moral injury.
Moral injury. Got it. So that's I feel like that's something I've dealt with because so I don't know if you how much you should say, and I've shared with people on the podcast. There were moments in my and I've sort of self therapized.
Right. You're
So-
definitely like you have an associates in therapy.
But my association, but my self-association and like being able to reflect and like work these things out. There's been times in my life that I've physically and mentally have abused people.
Yes.
And it's been unfortunate. At the time, it's just I was still me. I was still Wilson, the one that people know and are like, oh, this is what like wow, there's something about him. But there's these deep emotions and things I yet to like work through that when alcohol became a thing or I was just not in control of those that emotion led to me putting my hands on somebody or me like mentally physically abusing them. And for the longest that what's it called?
Moral injury.
Like for that, like that was the thing that started like giving me the awareness to be like I don't want to feel this anymore. And that's what really started the trajectory of me like working through. I'd be like, okay, what are the things that are making this happen? And then just I deep dove, everything from child trauma or the stuff that everyone goes through. And I also feel like it's generational. I feel like every generation there's like an acceptance of what we seem to be true and acceptable within society. Right. So like every generation I feel like shares some of this trauma as a kid, right? Like depending on where like whatever generation you grow up with. And so all of that combined, just working through that and then realizing, but understanding like these were the things, like that was the feeling that I didn't want to feel anymore. And that was what pushed me to be like, okay, I got to change something.
Right.
And something that I share with people is like, I feel like the way I've broken down is like 3 levels of change. One, you're unaware of it. Then you become aware. Right, so unaware is just like it's just what your repetitive cycle is.
You're doing it. You don't have any insight.
You don't have any insight, right? Like it's how you're influenced. You were taught this way, or whatever. Like, and then all of a sudden you become aware of something, or like I don't know, there's something here that needs to change, and you start identifying. You're like, okay, well, I need to do this different. And then there's these moments where like you know that you need to do this thing different in this moment, and yet you don't because you're still I feel like very programmed, or just you're very reactionary. You haven't yet done the mental reps to change that decision making.
Or even that you can trust that behavior. Usually that kind of behavior begins at an earlier phase in our life where we really need the behavior to survive. Like maybe we grow up in like a really abusive household, or we're in a life situation earlier in life where these behaviors that seem like aggressive towards other people or even manipulative, like we really did them because without them we couldn't survive. And then that situation starts to change, but we carry the behaviors with us into situations where they're no longer applicable. But then the part of our brain that helps us survive, the limbic brain, it survives it operates almost exclusively on experience. And so it needs positive experiences of other types of behavior before it trusts that behavior to do it. Like, so nothing changes until you do. another way to say it is like your survival brain, your Olympic brain doesn't change until it has other experiences that it trusts.
Oh, I love that. We're gonna have to add that on the shirt.
It's a little long for a slogan. Probably hashtag.
Yeah, I gotta go with that for sure. No,
Yeah.
for sure. That makes, and that's exactly it. Because I feel like once you have, so for me it was like, okay, I know there was things like drugs, alcohol. We had to like slow that down. The emotional regulation. Usually, like I would have blow ups if I was under the influence. Like I would go back to rage. So that was the first thing I had to like. And then I realized that like there was moments like I was like, okay, this is the moment where I typically would blow up and like my veins and everything goes crazy. And I didn't. I was like, I'm not going to do that, and I didn't. And then there was like this feeling, the positive reinforcement of like, oh, that's what it would feel like if I did something different, and this is my result, the outcome.
Yeah.
And that is when I started. I was like, okay, let me keep working on it, keep working. But I've also had moments where I was like, okay, I know this is the moment, but you still blow up. And then again, it's that reinforcing of I don't want to feel this, and then it goes back.
Right. There's a certain amount. The one good thing about the survival brain or the limbic brain, which I just call it the survival brain, is that it doesn't, when it's triggered, it doesn't deal with logic very well.
Right.
But the one hack with it is that if you rehearse things in advance, it will accept rehearsal as like a lived experience. So like literally if you go into a meditative state, you go into a mindful and meditative state, then in real time you rehearse reactions to predictable situations. Your limbic brain will accept that as a true lived experience. Then the next time it happens in real life, you're more likely to behave a certain way that's with a better outcome. Yeah. And then once you've done that a few times, then the survival brain really starts to trust those alternative behaviors. But there's going to be times where you still blow up.
Yeah, you revert, and it's just like, but the more the more you. Because I've seen it for first
experience.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm like, wow, it's great because you can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
That's really good.
Yeah. Okay, so can we unpack a little bit of what was your influence growing up, and then obviously you have an awesome story, right? So can we unpack that a little bit? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
What was your influence growing up?
Yeah, so I grew up, like I was born in Fort Smith, Arkansas. But really, my family moved around. My parents divorced when I was very young. So when I was like 4 years old, and maybe 4 or 5 years old. And my mom, she remarried. And so I was raised by my stepfather, which I really consider my father. Yeah. I still had a relationship with my biological father till he died. I was 11 years old when he died in a motorcycle accident. Okay. He was just going home from work, and he worked a night shift. He was going home early in the morning. He was hit by a drunk driver. Damn. And, so eventually we landed in Burlington, Kansas, which is a very like rural part of the state. And so that's really where I call home, Burlington, Kansas.
Could we, when that happened with your dad, how were you feeling at that moment? Like, what was that?
I mean, it was kind of, what was interesting to me was that I didn't have like an immediate hardcore reaction, because my only experience with him was like spending like maybe a couple weeks or a month with him in the summertime. So it wasn't like he passed away. He died like in October, if I remember correctly. And it wasn't until like the next summer that I was like, oh man, I'm not going to go visit my dad. So
look at you.
Yeah. And also like, even though my mother was remarried, I think she also she really had that death really hit her hard. Right. And, that had, so kind of seeing the people impacted the people around me more, like my grandparents. Yeah. They, especially my grandfather, he kind of checked out for a few years. He just, just didn't sing for 2 or 3 years because he was just so depressed and kind of checked out because that was his son. Yeah. Who died, and so I don't know how big that influence was until later. Like when I started working as a therapist, or other times when I would be, or myself when, because I've been sober, I stopped drinking 13 years ago. So I've been in recovery for alcohol for 13 years. And, I remember when I would drive, like the last time I really drank heavily, I was like drunk driving, and that was not the first time. Right. And so I started thinking about, hey, like this is how I lost my father, right. Or my biological father. Right. And, but the good thing is like my stepfather, such a good guy. And I never when I talk about default, my father is my stepfather.
Yeah.
I don't even think of him. I don't even think of it as my stepfather.
Right. I have a similar story. Pops.
Yeah.
He left behind.
Right.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And so then,
Then so I graduate from high school. I go to college for 1 semester, and it's not working out at all. I'm not mature enough to make it work. And so I joined the Army, like literally like on, I went to like the recruiter on December 7th, signed up, and they had me in basic training by December 30th.
That's great.
And so like just in that little month, I joined the military. I go through basic, I go through jump school, and then I get stationed with the 2nd Squadron, 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment in Germany, which was actually a great unit to be in at the time because this is during the Cold War. And there was really no prospect of like war or combat or anything at the time. It was during a kind of a period of prolonged peace in our country. But the 2nd ACR like had the job of patrolling the border between East and West Germany. So we had like a real mission where we carried ammunition, and we would like observe like the Soviet military or the East German military. So it felt like you had a real job to do. And so that was cool. But then the Gulf War starts, and so we get deployed to Iraq, and so that was where my combat experience took place. So there's a battle that took place during the Gulf War called the Battle of the 73 Easting, and so I was a part of that battle, and it was like one of the more for that particular war, the Gulf War, where there was actually like a real kind of pitched battle where we were like in an offensive portion of the battle, and then we had to stop and go into a defensive position, and we were attacked for about 12 hours. And so that was, the like combat experience.
Wow.
So it's not like not comparable to guys that did things later, but it was a pretty, we were fighting the Republican Guard, Talakana division of the Republican Guard, and another armored unit of Iraqis. We'd actually swung north of them, and we were blocking the retreat back into Iraq. So that's why they were biting through us so desperately, because we were blocking the retreat.
Wow. How is that like experience?
That's where that changed things, because like I had a close friend that was killed in that, and also just seeing like combat close up, and seeing it got pretty bloody at times, because we were we were in armor vehicles, but the Iraqis, a lot of their unit was also mechanized infantry, so there was a lot of intense combat going on. Of course, we had the advantage of artillery and the advantage of air support, so that worked to our advantage. But it was later, that's where like some of the moral injury issues started to come up afterwards.
You've been in it,
right?
Wow. And then because we've talked to a couple of veterans, and I think everyone, I don't want to say everyone, but the people that I have talked to, there's a couple of things. One, they wish they would have known a little bit more before they got in, like as far as because like at 18 years old, right? You're 18.
You have no idea.
You have no idea, right? So that's one thing I've always discussed with it. It's like at 18 years old, it's like we think we understand, but like you have no clue, and then you're sort of put into these positions and trained, really given an influence to like, this is what the way it works here, and then you just have to go through. And then when you get out, then it's like, how do you help someone transition?
How to make sense? The transition was totally bizarre, so that's where you come back, and it's almost like you feel like you're entering Disney World. It doesn't feel like there's this real strong sense of derealization. Right. Like it doesn't feel
like everybody else is walking around normally like this.
Well, yeah, and it doesn't feel normal, because like when you're in like a combat environment, or even the preparation for combat and then combat, you're dealing very low on, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's just survival, and then after that, when people are getting upset about different political issues, or can you pay your mortgage, or these are not survival issues, and so it takes a while to readjust to that. And then, if you're abusing alcohol, other bad habits, that doesn't help the situation.
So take you to like, so once you got out, like, once you got out, were you aware of what was happening?
No, it took me a while to actually figure it out. Like I definitely had some post-combat stress where like I wasn't like one of these people that couldn't be in public, But like if I went somewhere, I wanted to get in and out. Like it felt like a military operation. Like, okay, we're going to go in the store, we're going to buy it, and then we're going to, we're going to infiltrate it, then we're going to exfiltrate it. Let's get it done. Or like later when I would take my kids to Disney, I'd like go on the rides. It's been on 5 rides, now we're leaving. Like there was always this kind of hypervigilance and underlying tension.
How long? How long was that?
Well, that was like, I mean, I'm kind of jumping ahead of the story a little bit, but really, like when I went to counseling, like in 2004, like there was this moment where my life was just totally spinning out of control, and I was like, if I don't, that's the story I was telling you earlier about.
Do share with us.
Yeah, and so so there was, so I've always been a Christian, but most of that time I wasn't really following the dictates. I wasn't following Jesus. I wasn't following the dictates of being a Christian, and I was just driving through Daytona Beach one day, and I really felt like God was talking to me, and like God said, like, if you don't stop what you're doing now, I don't think you'll ever stop. Like you need to make a change now. And so like I pulled over to the side of the road, I started praying, like I was in tears, and then I even though the internet existed back in 2000, this was in December of 2004, and internet existed, I still was more familiar with the Yellow Pages. So I went home, opened the Yellow Pages, like looking for psychologists. They're like, well, if you want a counselor, like go to counseling. And like I'd never been to a counselor, I was very prideful that I'm not ever going to go to a counselor. And so found a counselor, started counseling, and then did that for several years, and I felt it was very effective. And then from that experience, I decided to become a therapist myself. And like I was telling you before, like I remember I was sitting in session and I told my therapist, I was like, hey, I've decided to be a therapist. And like he had this look of like shock and fear on his face. Like, are you sure you're ready to do that? And but so I like, this was when I made this decision, it was like maybe around October, November, and I wanted to start as soon as possible. And the only school that like had a program that started in January was Stetson, and close by where we're at now in DeLand, Florida. So I started that, and
Here locally.
Yeah, locally, and and I was maybe 38 years old at the time when I started. So counseling is definitely a second career.
Wow, fantastic.
Yeah.